Kalispera και καλώς ορίσατε. Good evening and welcome to the Greek Centre for the Greek History and Culture Seminar Program. My name is Spiridoula Dimitriou and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Greek Orthodox community of Melbourne and Victoria. I would like to commence by acknowledging that the Kulin nations are the traditional custodians of the land upon which we have gathered here tonight. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. I also extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We are here tonight to hear the Pontian Genocide Memorial Lecture to be delivered by Dean Kalimniou. Our sponsor tonight is Roma Siranidu in memory of Olga Siranidu. We thank Mrs. Siranidu for her ongoing support of the Greek community's seminar program. Dean Kalimniou is a lawyer, journalist, writer, and familiar face in our community, for he is a great supporter of many organisations and initiator of many events. He cares deeply about Greek culture. Over the recent years, his play scripts of Karagiosis's shadow puppet plays have been performed at the Greek community's Antipodes Festival with great success. Dean has remastered the traditional folklore repertoire to enable a Greek-Australian audience across generations to connect with the form. The funny and ironic expression "ereglendia" encapsulates all that is hilarious about this slapstick genre, and I, for one, cannot hear the expression without smiling. Dean has published 7 poetry collections in Greek and has translated the works of many local Greek authors into English. He has also contributed to the translation of the 19th century Greek author Alexandros Papadiamantis' short stories in the critical anthology titled The Boundless Garden, Selected Short Stories. Papadiamantis can be considered a type of proto-feminist figure amongst the writers of his era. Dean's most recent book is titled Simela and the Magic Kemenche. This is his first bilingual children's book and is available tonight at the bookstall at the back of the room. Dean's lecture tonight is entitled Kick-Ass Women of Pontus, a Homage, and pays tribute to the heroic women of Pontus. The unsung heroines of Pontus have made significant contributions to Greek culture and society, but have remained on the periphery of discourse on Hellenism. The 19th of May is the date that was designated by the Greek Parliament in 1994 for the yearly commemorance for the Pontian Genocide. The significance of this date being that Mustafa Kemal, the President of the Turkish Republic, on the 19th of May in 1919 intensified the campaign against the Pontian Greeks in Samsunda. The campaign resulted in forced expulsion, massacres and systematic extermination of Pontian Greeks living in the regions of Pontus along the Black Sea coast of the present-day Turkey. The Greek Centre tonight is lit up in red to mark the Pontian Genocide and our remembrance of this episode. The red lights symbolise the 350,000 Pontian people who perished during this campaign. I now ask Penny Tombonopoulos from the Central Pontian Associations of Melbourne and Victoria and the Victorian Pondiki Astia to come to the podium and say a few words and commence proceedings.
Sorry, thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Spiridoula said, my name is Penny Tombonopoulos, and on behalf of Pondiki Astia, Merimna Pondion Kirion Oceania, and the Greek community of Melbourne, I would like to welcome you all here this evening for the annual Pontian Genocide Memorial Lecture, Kick-Ass Women of Pontus, a Homage. We would also like to acknowledge the continued contribution of Ms. Roma Siachos in memory of her niece Olga Siranidis. Again, thank you to Spiridoula. She pretty much introduced everything that I was just about to say, so I'm not going to hold everyone up. I would like to take this opportunity to invite Dean Kalimniou to the stand and just thank you for his yearly contribution, even through the COVID years, he did the online seminars and now as well. So everybody welcome Dean. Could I just get everyone standing for 1 minute of silence, please? Thank you. Just before Dean takes the stand, I'd just also like to take this opportunity, in light of the lecture being the topic that it is. The girls, including myself, are from Pontian, and we're wearing various costumes that are from Sevastia, myself, regions of Matsuka, Samsunda, and Sanda. And you're more than welcome to come and approach us after the lecture.
No, I don't want that one. This is the one. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about tonight is something that occurred to me from the outset when we were trying to figure out the nature of this topic. What is a Pontian woman? And obviously we have some fine specimens of Pontian womanhood to my right, who can sit down if you feel that you must, because, okay, you're Pontian Amazon women and I don't go there. I've been fortunate in my life to have met many awesome Pontian women, and they've left an indelible mark upon me. Take, for example, Olga Siranidis, in whose memory this lecture is dedicated. She was a remarkable woman who fought bravely against cancer, and we'll never forget it. And then there's people like the sponsor of this lecture, her aunt, Roma Skiachos, who's a stalwart of Pontian Hellenism in Melbourne and was recently referred to in Greek media as a treasure of Pontian Hellenism. And she's pictured here, obviously, with the late Olga Siranidou, and she's also the sponsor of tonight's lecture. So thank you very much, Kyria Skiachou. And then there's people like Simela Stamatopoulos, the former president of one of the Pontian federations, whose work to educate children about the Pontian genocide and Asia Minor in general is truly breathtaking. Here she's pictured reading the Bishop the Riot Act. And then there's my introducer. Oh no, she's gone. Penny Tsobalopoulos. There she is. And over there as well, in the flesh. Dance teacher, former president of Pontian Kiestia, pictured here with her boys who are amazing in their own right. A fearless lady, and one who, in the history of her club, took on the older generation when change was needed and won. Okay. Then you get people like Sofia Skiachou, who's an advisor to the governor of Victoria, so you can't get more high-powered than that unless you leave the state, here in full Pontian regalia. And then you get people like Litsa Athanasiadou, who's the glue that keeps the Pontian community together, here with the mayor of Ballarat, and Penny Zobanopoulos, builder of monuments, creator of great things, and much more. And then you get people like, Yaya Varvara, the matriarch of Pontian Hellenism. And I have to say that out of all of the Pontian women that I've ever met, who didn't run away, Yaya Varvara's touched me the most. Dignified, lively, uncompromising, fearless, and fiercely loving. She's given not only me, but hundreds of other younger people, people of the younger generation, lessons in decency, in selflessness. We miss her. So, having said that, in the lead up to this lecture, I posted on social media this painting by Aristidis Konomos. It's entitled An Aristocratic Lady Dressed in a Traditional Costume from Pontus in 1859. And the response I got from people that saw this post was, nah, kanis lathos, can't be. Too revealing, cleavage, shoulders. That's because we are used to Pontian women looking like this. Demure, softly spoken, well covered, sort of looking askance, not looking at you directly. And so when I posted this pic in social media advertising the lecture, I received howls of disapprobation. You can't do this. She's not Pontian. This is not the appropriate image, until I explained that this is the great Galini Gadotidu from Matsuka. And that quite a few people. Obviously it isn't. It's Gidal Gado, but we'll talk about that later. Now, this lady is not Pontian. She's Simone de Beauvoir. And in The Second Sex, she argued that women are at a disadvantage in society where they grew up under a multiplicity of incompatible myths about women. Instead of being encouraged to dream their own dreams, pursue meaningful projects like dressing up as eye candy for lectures by men about women, Beauvoir argued that the myths proposed to women, whether in literature or history or science or psychoanalysis, encouraged them to believe that to be a woman was to be there for others and especially for men. So in the first volume of her book, she explores some what she calls facts and myths that had been written about women by men. And the irony of a man sitting here tonight pontificating about Pontian womanhood should not be lost on all of you. That's a Pontian joke in real life. In the second book, she sought to describe what it's like for women to be women in the world where men defined them in these ways, and how that led many of them to feel divided and dissatisfied. Women, she wrote, are doomed to feelings of failure and guilt, because if a woman succeeds at conforming to the mythical ideals of femininity, she'll be a mirage and not a person. She'll be a photo, she'll be a two-dimensional object, one-dimensional object. She was expected to embody an inhuman entity, Beauvoir says, the strong woman, the admirable mother, Parcharomana, yeah, the virtuous woman, and so on. So because femininity is so associated with prioritizing the needs of others, thus, pondios είμαι και ό,τι θέλω κάνω, with being likable, giving, being available, when a woman thinks, dreams, sleeps, desires, and aspires for herself, she becomes less feminine, which in the social currency of the time at least meant that she became a worse woman. So, this is one of the reasons why in choosing the topic, kick-ass women of Pontus, and I consciously decided to avoid referring to women of the 19th and 20th century, like the ones in this picture, simply because I think that they fit the stereotype that Beauvoir identified. They're chaste, they're docile, they're self-effacing, they're meek, they seem to know their place, if not accept it, and they're strong in the spheres that men want them to be. So you'll note that the creators of this flyer chose to omit the word kick-ass from the title, leaving it as women in Pontus. So this form of self-censoring, and it makes sense, I mean, we had a discussion with Simela Stamatopoulos, how would we render this in Greek? Πώς λέμε kick-ass στα ελληνικά? Κλωτσόκολες γυναίκες του Πόντου, κλωτσοκόλες, δεν ξέρω. It's a culturally specific word, doesn't translate into Greek, I don't think. There's a self-censoring here which carries with it a toolbox of assumptions as to the nature of Pontian womanhood. It's the same myth that's been propagated around Greek womanhood since the foundation of the Greek state. The man is the fighter, the woman remains at home and tends to the hearth, except there. Sometimes, as in Suli, she fights alongside men, whereas in Pontus, she's generally a passive object of sexualized violence, whose suffering serves to create a collective European identity against the sexually violent other. And sometimes, and especially with speakers from Greece and male speakers, there's almost a glee in the eye when they're talking about the sufferings of women at the hands of the Turks. It verges on the pornographic. That's disturbing. They're not Pontian, they're Armenian. They've got their own narrative with women, which we won't talk about tonight, but it's very interesting. So a century earlier than Beauvoir, Honoré de Balzac advised men that the secret to having wives who were satisfied to be slaves was to persuade them that if they were queens, domestic service was the glory of their reign. But if to love was to serve, and to serve was the glory of reigning, Beauvoir said, then why didn't men want to share in this service? So that's the reason why I decided tonight to present in brief, and this is the longest introduction to a lecture I've ever done, so sorry, some of the lives of the more obscure but more fascinating women of Pontus from ancient to Byzantine times, simply because this is the time I think that the Pontian women of whatever language, race or religion held power and actually exercised it. Because this is another assumption that we need to look at, namely that Pontian equals Greek. The answer is, of course, that depends on the context in which the word is used. How Pontian, for example, do we consider the great Olympian pole vaulter Katerina Stefanidou, who has never lived in Pontus and now resides in America? Or do we let her in because she's brilliant and because she kicks goals and does all the great things that she does? And how Pontian is the Vavo in Trapezunda who speaks Romaica but is a Muslim and is a Turk? So in doing all this, or endeavoring to do what we're going to do tonight, we need to be conscious that our objections to accounts about Pontian women should not be that she's strong, we hear she's a strong woman, or even necessarily that she's self-sacrificial. It's the main problem, even with my own narrative, is that we don't get to hear her side of the story. Yeah, all the accounts are written by males, from a male perspective, so it's impossible to know whether our understanding of her experiences flows freely from her values and her vision of life, or from conformity to an ideal imposed by others, to the idea that her raison d'etre, for example, is the comfort and the convenience that she gives to others. We need to be conscious of this. Basically a way of saying that I'm talking out of my hat because I'm a male. Now, so I want to begin in keeping with this theme of idealization, beginning not with a real Pontian woman, but a made-up one. The Princess of Trebizond is an 1869 opera by Jacques Offenbach, the one that wrote the Can-Can, Orpheus in the Underworld. In this opera, so there are operas, Western operas about Pontians, this is amazing, in which a woman impersonates a wax likeness of the Princess of Trapezunda, only to have a nobleman fall in love with the likeness, not the real woman itself. Sometimes the patriarchy can only relate to women if they fashion them in their own image. So I think that's an interesting way of a segue into what we're going to talk about. Now, we need to pay homage now to the first lady of Pontus, who according to Greek mythology was Thalassa, the wife of Pontus. You can't get more Pontian than the wife of Pontus, the pre-Olympian primordial god of the sea. Now, according to Gavrias, the ancient Greek collector of fables, Thalassa gave as good as she got. So in one fable, a farmer, he's witnessing a shipwreck and he reproaches the sea, says, "You're an enemy of mankind." No? And she assumes the form of a woman because she's I Thalassa, Meita. Yeah? And she says, "I'm gentler than that dry land of yours." In another fable, the rivers supposedly complain to Thalassa that their sweet water is turned undrinkably salty by contact with her. And the sea says, "Well, if you know that's the case, why don't you avoid contact with me?" No, she gives as good as she gets. And the commentary suggests the tale may be applied to people who criticize others inappropriately, even though they may be actually helping them. Now, this first Pontian lady was an enduring one. She was depicted as a woman, you can see, clothed in bands of seaweed, half submerged in the sea, with crab claw horns that were formerly an attribute of Okeanos, the ocean, now transferred to her head. In one hand, she generally is depicted holding a ship's oar, and in the other hand, a dolphin. Now, she even persists in Byzantium, as we can see in this 6th century AD medical discourse, where she's portrayed with coral emanating out of her body. And it reminds us of the tree of Jesse in Orthodox iconography, except in the Orthodox iconography, the coral-like structure, the branches are coming out of a man. Here it's coming out of the sea. So, but then we go back to hallowed antiquity, or at least the Hollywood version of it, to discover that Pontian women have always been kicking ass, literally as well as metaphorically, ever since mythological times. We know that according to Herodotus, the so-called father of history, Themiskira near Samsunda in Pontus was the capital of the Amazons. We know that these Amazons were conceived of as a mirror image of the patriarchy as it was understood then and now. So, group of female warriors and hunters who surpassed the men in physical agility and strength, in archery, riding skills, the art of combat. Their society was closed to men. It was a woman's club. Men were not welcome. And they only raised their daughters and returned their boys to their husbands or fathers, and they would only socialize with them briefly in order to reproduce. So one of the first kick-ass Amazons was Sinope, or Sanapi, who got into some type of dispute with her tribe. So she fled the area where modern Sinope, the city of Sinop now in Pontus, lies, and married a local king, as you do. She habitually drank a lot of wine, she had a drinking problem, and she was said to have received her name from the circumstance as Sanapi was purported to mean drunkard in the local language. You can see that in this picture of her, this is a coin, it's a Persian coin. It's not a Greek coin, it's a Persian coin by the Persian satrap, governor of Sinope, Avrokomas, showing that these myths were widely disseminated and there was general consensus that the Amazons came from Pontus. Now, I think the most well-known Amazons was Queen Hippolyta in English, who was the daughter of the war god Ares, and wore his war belt that made her invincible in battle. In the myth of Heracles, Hippolytes' belt, Zostir Hippolytis in the ancient, was the object of his ninth labor. He had to go and get it. He was sent to retrieve it for Admiti, the daughter of King Eurystheus, and most versions of the myth indicate that Hippolyte was so impressed with Hercules' strapping figure, Kevin Sorbo-like, leather pants, the works, the young ones won't know what I'm talking about, that she gave him the belt without argument, which I think is amazing. Perhaps while visiting him on his ship. Now let's consider this. Here's Irakli, the greatest figure of Hellenic masculinity, going off in order to capture an article of female clothing. And then they're trying to tell us that Dan Andrews is progressive. We were way there before all of that. So then, according to Pseudo-Apollodoros, the goddess Hera makes herself appear as one of the Amazons, and she spreads a rumor among them that Heracles are abducting their queen. Yeah. So the Amazons attacked the ship, and in the fray that followed, Oiraklis, he slew Hippolyte, stripped her of her belt, fought off the attackers, and sailed away, as you can see from this painting by Nicholas Knupfa. So much for the sisterhood. Thank you very much, Hera. She always did that. So, because that's a bit unedifying, another kick-ass Amazon of Pontus was Queen Thalestris, who was the last recorded queen of the Amazons. So, according to the mythological Greek Alexander romance, which is an amazing magical tale that has nothing to do with the history of Alexandros, but is much more interesting, Queen Thalestris of the Amazons brought 300 women to Alexander the Great, hoping to breed a race of children as strong and intelligent as he. Now, from a male perspective, you think, whoa, but let's consider that. It's just subverting the narrative. Instead of considering him a great king of whom you should pay homage and bow down and respect, to this queen, he's just breeding stock. No, we're just taking him out to the paddock. So, according to legend, she stayed with the king for 13 days and nights in hope that the great warrior would father a daughter by her. Yeah? And you can see how rapt she is in this 18th century Rococo painting of the Amazon Queen Thalestris in the camp of Alexander the Great by Johann Georg Platzer. Now, these 18th century German romantics love this kind of stuff. So now, when we look at the way the Amazons of Pontus are portrayed in ancient Greek art, a few things become apparent. Firstly, they're wearing pants. Yeah? Who wears the pants in the family? We do. Which is a symbol of their non-Greek origin. To wear pants is a symbol of being non-Greek in ancient Greek painting iconography. They're also wearing a Persian cap, that high cap that they wear, again a motif to signify their otherness. So ancient Greek authors have similarly deliberately placed their locations on the margins, on the periphery, if you like. I know Peter Stefanidis likes that word, of the Greek world, as far as possible. And Pontus is on the periphery, it's on the margins. And at the time that we're talking about, most of Pontus would have been non-Greek anyway. Its inhabitants speaking either Iranian languages or Proto-Georgian type of languages like Proto-Laz, with Greeks only occupying a few colonies on the coast to begin with. So it's this otherness, this idea that these women are subverting the natural order that the ancient Greek writers are emphasizing. But we know that the existence of the Amazons is not entirely mythological. We've found discoveries of battle-scarred female skeletons buried with their weapons in the area, bows, arrows, quivers, spears, proving that women warriors were not merely figments of the classical author's imagination, but they were a product of a particular civilization and lifestyle. So there is truth to the myth. But now we're leaving myth and going to our first kick-ass ancient woman of Pontus who we actually know really existed. Yeah? That's Queen Laodike, literally the people judger. Mother of Mithridates, or Mithridates. I always thought if I was going to set up a Pontian dating app, I'll call it Mithridates. That's TM and you can't copy that and that doesn't leave this room. So he's the one that took on Rome. Unlike Camilla, and rather like Meghan Markle, Queen Laodike actually exercised power. And she conspired to keep her son away from the throne. And she promoted instead his confusingly named brother Mithridates Christos instead. So Jesus Christ and Mithridates Christ. And you don't mix up the two. Laodike ruled Pontus alone for 7 years. And she was set to do so for longer until Mithridates the Great dethroned her, because that's what you do. Now, think about this. You have this queen in Roman times who is ruling over a kingdom, and yet you go to 800 AD and Charlemagne is declared Holy Roman Emperor because there's a Byzantine empress on the throne, Constantinople. So for the West, you can't have a queen legitimately ruling over people in their own right. I think it says something about the way that femininity was conceived of and negotiated in the ancient Greek world. So Mithridates did what a lot of these people did, married his sister, also named Laodike for ease of reference, and she was given a good deal of prominence in the running of the kingdom. She set about establishing good relations with the citizens of Athens and the Greek island of Delos, which was very important, and she made benefactions to the Athenians and the Delians, and we found these things. On Delos, we found honorific statues which have survived that have been identified to be her. And in keeping with the discourse of the chaste and demure Pontian woman, it's worth mentioning that while Mithridates was off fighting the Romans, Laodike entertained lovers who may or may not have been visiting Pontian singers, like the ones that come to Melbourne and have a good time. Laodike became pregnant and gave birth to a son. To conceal her unfaithfulness to Mithridates, Laodike plotted to have her husband poisoned. I mean, what's a girl going to do? However, Mithridates returns to Pontus suddenly and without warning. This is like a Greek movie from the 1960s. Catching Laodike with her lovers, which is not like a Greek movie from the 1960s. Her brother/husband is apparently shocked and distressed, but he hides his rage and he embraces Laodike. And he organizes festive banquets to welcome himself back. But prior to the feast, Mithridates' servants warn him of Laodike's plots. Mate, she wants to kill you. And they also rat out her co-conspirators. And Mithridates curses his late mother for raising such a treacherous daughter, and then has Laodike and her collaborators summarily executed, although he spared her newborn son because that was kind of his kid too. So one of the dead Laodike's daughters is really interesting, and we all are probably familiar with this controversy over Netflix with Cleopatra, who, as we know, was an African queen related to Jada Pinkett Smith. Well, there's not only the Jada Pinkett Smith Cleopatra, who is my favourite Cleopatra by far, even better than Elizabeth Taylor and Gal Gadot. we've got our own Cleopatra in Pontus, and that's not because we were jealous. It's a fact. There is a Cleopatra of Pontus. And as it says here, Queen of Armenia, Il Tigrane, arias by Hasse Vivaldi and Gluck. So if Vivaldi knew about her, she's got to be true. He was Italian. I tried to convince someone that he was Greek, and they believed me. So she became really influential in Pontus, but even more so in neighboring Armenia. And she married the greatest ever king of Armenia, Tigranes the Great, who I try and tell the Armenians was Greek. They say, no, he can't have been Greek. His name was Tigranes. Of course, Tigranes Kala. They don't get it. They don't get it, but they're Armenians. Armenians have no sense of humor. He, however, conquered Eastern Asia Minor, Syria, the Caucasus, northern Iran and Mesopotamia, and Cleopatra was very much her father Mithridates' daughter. So Tigranes chose a foreign policy very different from that of Mithridates towards the Roman Republic based on his interests. And even though Mithridates is off trying to kill all the Romans and committing genocide against the Romans, which he did, we talked about that last year, those of you that were here, he signed a treaty with them following a battle called the Battle of Artaxata. And then Cleopatra says, no, this is not right. You're going off expanding the Armenian kingdom. What about daddy at home and the Pontians? Let's get my sons to betray Tigranes. And what better way of attacking the patriarchy than turning the would-be patriarchs against the patriarch himself? That's something that Greek ladies have been doing since the dawn of time. I point you gently into the direction of the myth of Uranus. So in 66 BC, Pompey captures the younger Tigranes and takes him to Rome as a hostage. That's the boy. Tigranes escapes in 58 BC with the assistance of one of the Romans, and the sons try to seize the throne from daddy Tigranes, and then they're executed. So Cleopatra does when everything goes to poo. What do? You go back to daddy, and she lives the remainder of her life in Pontus. Here we see her portrayed by an Armenian actress, because unlike the Greeks, Armenians don't, if I can use the word bitch, about not being portrayed the way we'd like to. They actually go off and make their own movies. So, possibly Greeks might want to think about doing that if they want to control the narrative, but that's just a friendly suggestion. What would I know? Cleopatra had a sister, Vripetina, who should actually bear the nickname, not kick ass, but bite ass, because according to historical accounts, she had double rows of teeth like sharks. And hers is a sad story, indicative of the fate of women who are treated as pawns in broader geopolitical conflicts. According to Ammianos Marcellinus, during the Third Mithridatic War, there were a lot of Mithridatic wars, Vripetina fell severely ill. She was left behind in the fortress of Sinora under the protection of the eunuch Menophilos. You never ever leave princesses under the protection of eunuchs called Menophilos. That's something that if you're going to take anything out of tonight, there's that one. Beware of eunuchs called Menophilos. I know this from personal experience. Now, when the Roman forces under Mallius Priscus besieged the fortress, this eunuch, Menophilos, kills the princess in order to prevent her from being captured by the Romans, and then commits suicide. And the whole scene is immortalized in a De Mulieribus Claris by Giovanni Boccaccio, and that's the manuscript from which we get this picture. So it was a really widely read tale in the West. So I think we would have gathered by now that the doings of the Pontian royal family make the Windsors look like amateurs. Yeah. So let's leave them for the time and concentrate on some of the commoners who made it to the top. They're my favorites. Stratoniki of Pontus was one of the mistresses of King Mithridates of Pontus, and she contrived a way of becoming his fourth wife, as her tell-all memoirs Spare Demon reveals, and that's a very inside joke. Demon means me. Spare, of course, refers to Prince Harry's book. No one was going to get it, but I thought I'll just put it out there. Thank you for pretending to laugh. It makes me feel good. So Stratoniki was a citizen of the Pontian city of Kabira, and she was originally, as we learned from the historians, a woman of mean birth, and she was the daughter of a harpist. I've never met the daughter of a harpist. I want to do this. It's on my bucket list. along with avoiding eunuchs called Menophilos. So she followed the family trade and became a harpist in the court of Mithridates. She became one of his mistresses and then one of his wives in 86 BC because she was there. And we learn that Stratoniki obtained a lot of influence over him. She could tug at his heartstrings, if you'll pardon the pun. So as a result, when Mithridates was compelled to undertake a perilous retreat to the Black Sea during fighting the Romans, Mithridates left Stratoniki in charge of a fortress at a place called Kinon, where he had deposited all his treasure. Now that's a position of massive responsibility. So, but then Stratoniki is induced to hand over the fortress and the fortress's treasures to the Roman general Pompey on the condition that Pompey would spare the life of her son. And Mithridates didn't buy this. He considered this to be treason, so he put their son to death in front of her very eyes. She died in 63 BC when the kingdom of Pontus was actually annexed by the Roman general Pompey. But perhaps our most kick-ass queen of all, who is famous for leaving her traditional feminine role, cutting her hair, and learning to ride a horse in battle, as well as fighting with a lance, sword, and bow and arrow, all for the sake of her family. No, not Mulan, but Ipsikratia. Now, Ipsikratia was another concubine of the randy Mithridates, and she accompanied him during his escape around the east coast of the Black Sea. The Romans were chasing him. He was hiding, counter-attacking, hiding, counter-attacking. This went on for ages until he was defeated by Pompey for the last time in 66 BC. And she died in an uprising in Phanagoria in 63 BC. That's up in the Crimea. Now, after Mithridates' defeat, Ipsikratia broke free from Pompey's blockade, and while the rest dispersed, she was only 3 who remained by the king's side. Now, Plutarch, the great historian, wrote that she was, now we're going to do some quoting so that you know that what I'm saying is true. Quotes, always manly, anthrovis, and extremely bold, the king consequently liked to call her Ipsikratis. At that time, taking possession of a cloak and of a horse of a Persian man, she neither flagged in body before the distances they ran, nor did she weary of tending the body and the horse of the king until they came to a place called Sinor, which was full of the king's coins and treasures. Now, Roman historian Valerius Maximus takes up the story, and he says, the queen Ipsikratia loved her husband with all the stops of affection let out. Imagine, what a image. You have this jar of affection, and you have stops in it, like corks, and then you let them out. And then all of that love stuff gushes out. That's amazing. So for his sake, she thought it was a pleasure to change the outstanding splendor of her beauty for a masculine style, which is a very polite Roman way of saying that they were both into cross-dressing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's de rigueur in Parliament these days. So she cut her hair, says Maximus, and habituated herself to horse and arms so that she might more easily participate in his tools and danger. Indeed, when he was defeated by Pompey and fleeing through wild peoples, that's the Greek tribes up in the mountains, she followed him with body and soul equally indefatigable. Her extraordinary fidelity was for Mithridates his greatest solace and most pleasant comfort in those bitter and difficult conditions, for he considered that he was wandering with house and home because his wife was in exile along with him. Now, interestingly, we've actually found the epitaph of Ipsikratia in Phanagoria in 2004. And the epitaph uses the masculine version of her name, not Ipsikratia, Ipsikratis, confirming what Plutarch said about her. He calls her the wife of Mithridates, Evpator Dionysos, but Ipsikratis, the male version of the name. Now, if anyone lived and breathed and possibly excreted power, though I was not there, so I don't know, it was Dynamis, who the Greeks among the audience will know the name actually literally means power, queen of the Bosporan kingdom on the upper Black Sea. So we're talking Crimea and Ukraine. She made a series of clever dynastic marriages to prevent her kingdom from falling into the hands of the Romans, and after the fall of Cleopatra of Egypt, she and another woman were the sole Greek female rulers left upon their thrones by the Romans. So when all of Greece or the Greek world succumbed to the Romans, there were only 2 semi-independent Greek kingdoms left, and they were both ruled by women, which I think is amazing. The other one was in Africa. Then we can talk about Pythodorida, who became the Queen of Pontus, the Bosporan kingdom up in Crimea, Cilicia down south, Cappadocia, after making also some savvy dynastic marriages. You've got to marry well. This is important. Meghan Markle understood this. She developed close friendships with the most interesting intellectuals of the period, and especially the geographer Strabon, who postulated the existence of a southern continent, didn't get it right, hence the expression Stravomara echi Stravona. I'm glad that one got a laugh. I've never tried that one before. And she corresponded with him and considered that he was virtuous. He also wrote admiringly about her business acumen. She was very good with the coins, stating that under her rule, policies were put in place that caused Pontus to flourish economically. She was a very, very good finance minister. Now, there are many other powerful Pontian women of the ancient world, but it's time now to turn to, what are we turning to? Byzantium. And in particular, the powerful women of Trapezunda. That's another dynamis there. As we know, in 1204, the Latins conquered Constantinople and apportioned the territories of the Byzantine Empire. That was the first colonial empire of modern times. They took over the Byzantine Empire, cut it up between. Venetians had a bit, Franks had a bit, and they all took a piece. And various members of the ruling Komnenos dynasty set up rival centers of power in Epirus, in Nicaea of Asia Minor, and in Trapezunda. They were all independent of each other. They were all cousins, and they all hated each other as cousins do, with the empire of Trapezunda lasting even after the second fall of Constantinople to the Ottomans in 1453. So now we're going to turn to Theodora Megali Komneni, who's... Oh, that's just the map to give you an idea of what's going on. So the empire of Nicaea is that rump bit there, the pink bit. Empire of Trebizond is there, and then you have the piddly other little bits ruled by Armenians, Franks, and everyone who could get their hands on whatever they could. So we're going to speak now about Theodora Megali Komneni, who was the empress of Trapezunda, saw the map before, from 1284 to 1285. Now the historian Michael Panaretos said that she was a daughter of the Emperor Manuel of Trebizond by Rusudan, a Georgian princess. And this is an important thing to know about the empire of Trapezunda in Pontus. It was a multicultural empire. It was a multiracial empire. It was a multilingual empire. Going back to what I said before about what is a Pontian woman, does that necessarily mean that she's Greek? It's a term which probably doesn't assist us when we're looking at this period of history. In 1284, with the help of the Georgian king of Imereti, which was a Georgian kingdom, David, she managed to seize the crown from her half-brother, Emperor John. Now, in the West, empresses were meek and mild and this and that. These ones went out and decided they wanted power and would take it from their brothers, from their fathers, or whoever was in the way, because she felt that she could do the job better, as the historians tell her. Then she gets defeated. John takes over the throne, but she managed to rule long enough to have coins minted in her own fashion. We have a few silver aspas, bronze numismata, evidence that she's the only empress of Trapezunda. There are others, we're going to talk about them, who actually coined money. And that's significant. We don't know what happens after John takes the throne. She leaves Trapezunda in 1285 and disappears from history. Some historians think she went to Georgia, the land of her mother. We don't know. I think the most, and you'll be pleased to know we're sort of almost at the end. Did someone snigger? Who was that? Go to the back of the class. The most, I think, important of all the Byzantine Pontian women is this lady here, Anna Anakhutlu, who was born into the family of the Grand Komneni, and she was the eldest daughter of Alexios II, the Grand Komnenos, and Jajak, the daughter of the Laz sovereign Azakhutlu, hence her surname Azakhutlu. Laz being a type of Georgian race, speaking the Georgian language. Most of them are Muslims these days. They still live in the region of Pontus. They're a linguistic minority who have been assimilated, apart from the linguistic part, into the broader Turkish society. She's the sister of Michael Anakhutlu and half-sister of Evdokia, the Grand Komneni. And we see, I couldn't find it, but the first depictions of her as a nun, possibly in the monastery of Saint Ephthemius in Jerusalem. So a lady from Pontus can end up in Jerusalem, which of itself, that's very far away. And we're talking about a period where in between Pontus and Jerusalem, there are warring Turkish tribes, Arabic tribes, Kurdish tribes. To be able to successfully make a journey like that requires resolve and wit. She was definitely not a person to pass by unnoticed. At some stage before 1340, she decides, no, it's not for me. I don't want to be a nun, and she returns to Trapezunda, where she decides to get involved in politics and creates a pocket of resistance in the region of Laziki in Pontus against the Empress Irene Paleologina, who was from Constantinople. And in 1341, she's biding her chance. When can I rid myself of this perfidious woman? The Turkmen tribes of Amida are attacking Trapezunda. She can't deal, the Empress Irene can't deal with all this. So then Anna says, well, you know what, step aside. I have better claims to the throne than you do. You got to go. And a significant role in the ascension of Anna Komnene was also played by civil conflicts that afflicted the empire after the murder of Manuel II, the Grand Komnenos, the Emperor of Trapezunda. And basically, so there are two factions. There's the Scholarios family that are supporting Irene, and then there's the Aminzadarios family who are supporting Anna, and she's playing one off against the other like a puppet show. She's allying with one, aligning with the other, betraying one, betraying the other, and slowly climbing the steps to achieve the pinnacle. She resists the central administration and exploits the burning of Trapezunda by the Turks in 1341 and forces Irene to abdicate the throne. So on the 17th of July 41, she enters Trapezunda triumphantly, followed by the Laz warriors of the king, Georgian King George, easily enough, as well as the Trapezundan Laz of the Lazian kingdoms. She's crowned empress, supported on the one hand by that Aminzandarios family we talked about. They became friends again. And on the other hand, by the Laz, the Zan, and all these other native tribes of the region. Now, it's one thing to scheme your way into power, and it's another thing to actually know what to do when you get there, as many politicians find out. And Anna's no exception. So she was expected to deal energetically with the massive challenges that the empire was facing, invested by the Turkoman tribes all around, a central administration that was collapsing, and also, and this is something that generally Greek historians don't talk about, she also had to keep the various linguistic and ethnic minorities within Trapezunda happy. Georgians, Laz, everybody else. And that proved to be too hard for her. So even though in 1342 she repels a raid by the Turkomans, but her supporters by this stage are getting alienated. I mean, if you have the Aminzandari who hate the Laz, who don't want the Zan to have privileges, and you can't please everyone, your credibility starts falling away. And that's what happened to her. So on the 30th of July, 1341, Michael Grand Komnenos, who became the subsequent emperor, spoiler alert, aided by the emperor in Constantinople, John Kandakouzinos, sailed from Constantinople to Trebizond with 3 battleships in order to marry the former Empress Irene. Now, this is significant. We're talking about the emperor of Constantinople, the emperor of Byzantium. No one else enjoys that title. The city confers with it legitimacy. But in order to make inroads into Pontus, they can't just attack and take it over. They have to marry the female ruler, or the purported female ruler of Pontus, to be able to justify their intervention. So where does the power lie? Lies in the lap of this lady. So they do that. He marries Irene, and they decide that Irene is a better fit because now she's married to money and power. But then they decide, no, Anna's a better fit. So then there's a massive fight. Then there's another fight. I'm speeding it up because then they fight again. Then they burn half the city. And then they burn the other half of the city. And then Michael's arrested, and then he's sent to a monastery. and then he escapes, and then Irene comes back, and then they force her to get on the ship and go to Constantinople. But then they all turn up with Genoese ships. They bring the Italians in, and you know that when the Italians come, it's the end. It means business. And then they depose Anna. And how do they depose Anna? It's not like that scene in The Godfather where, you know, Carlo Rizzi is about to be driven to the airport and then they get the garrote and they do that. We don't know. There was a tower. She was in it. They strangled her on the 3rd of September, 1342. Now I want to take a break, a very brief one, and consider that because Pontus was at the crossroads of civilizations, we remember one end of the Silk Road was Beijing at this time. Where was the terminal end of the Silk Road? Trapezunda. Not many people consider this, but Trapezunda was the other end of the Silk Road. And its women, the women of Trapezunda, played a profound role in influencing the development of nearby nations, something we've seen with the Armenians, possibly a little bit with the Georgians. Now, one Pontian woman that, as much as I'd like to, I'm not allowed to call kick-ass because she's actually a saint. And Archbishop Makarios says I'm not allowed to say that she's a kick-ass saint. The term does not exist theologically in Orthodoxy yet. She's so important to the Georgian people that she's been named Isapostolos, equal to the apostles. If you're Greek, you're only an Isapostolos if you've got a lot of money and power and you wear a crown and you save the Orthodox faith from ruin. So Konstantinos, the emperor, is considered an Isapostolos. This is Queen Nana, the consort of the king of Iberia, which is a fancy word for Georgia. And his name was Median III. And for her role in the conversion of Georgians to Christianity, she's regarded by the Georgian Orthodox Church as a saint and is canonized equal to the apostles, Isapostolos. And according to the Georgian chronicles, Nana was from the Greek territory, from Pontus, the daughter of Oligologos, the not really talkative one, which is interesting. And the medieval Georgian sources relate that Nana had been a staunch pagan, as you are, and despised Christian preaching until she was miraculously cured from a terrible disease. And there's nothing like being cured from a miraculous disease to inculcate a feeling of faith within you. I suggest it for everyone whose faith is lacking. And she was converted by a Cappadocian Christian monastery, by a missionary in a monastery called Saint Nino. She ruled Georgia for 2 years after her husband's death, so she was allowed to rule the kingdom on her own and was instrumental in spreading Christianity in the region. And obviously a lot of other members of the Komnenos family, Pontian women, became consorts to the rulers of Georgia because Georgia was next door, because the Georgian people were hardy, strong, warlike, and they were a bulwark against the encroaching Seljuk Turks and then the Ottoman Turks later on. Now, I want to finish this section of the lecture by making mention of the fact that it was not just in the Georgian and Armenian, and that is the Christian worlds, that Pontic women made an impression, but also in the Islamic world. And one thing that we know that by this stage, in the late Byzantine era, Pontic prides were given to Turkic and Iranian rulers, and they proved to be really influential as diplomats and as politicians. This is Theodora Megali Komnini, although you wouldn't think it, would you? Also known as Despina Khatun, the daughter of John of Trapezunda, who married the Akkoyunlu ruler, that's the white sheep tribe of the Turks, Uzun Hasan, in 1458. She became the mother of Khalima Alamshah Khatun, τα παραμύθια της Khalimas. Well, there was actually a real Khalima who became the mother of the first modernizer of Iran, the Safavid king Shah Ismail. So Shah Ismail, who is considered the greatest Iranian king ever, had a Pontian yaya Tromaratu. Now, John agreed to the marriage, so I don't want to give my daughter to these barbarous people who have a lot of money and are threatening to kill me, only if the daughter was allowed to continue in the Orthodox faith. And Uzun Hasan said, yeah, that's fine, I just need her for her breeding skills, so that's okay. And Despina was apparently famed for her beauty amongst the Greek women, and she was accompanied by a large group of Orthodox Christian priests and was allowed to build Orthodox churches in Iran. And then Uzun Hasan, he didn't really like the Ottomans, and the reason why he entered into this marriage was because he wanted to strengthen an anti-Ottoman alliance with the Pontians, and that's a smart way of gaining support of Greeks, Armenians, Georgians in one hit. It's a clever guy. Now, in Western Europe, because we've got to talk about them as well, Theodora Despina Khatun inspired the myth of the Princess of Trebizond, a fixture tale of damsels in distress, as well as a possible grand crusade against the Ottoman Turks. And the legend inspired many artists, including Pisanello. And a couple of years ago, we did a lecture about this, and this is supposed to be the King George slays the dragon, but what it's actually showing is the imminent demise of Trapezunda. And actually, it's Pisanello telling people we need to go and save Trapezunda. It's about to be taken over by the Turks. We did that another time. I think it's on YouTube. After the fall of Trapezunda, the last king of Trapezunda, David, was put under house arrest. And then in 1463, David was doing what people do. He was discovered attempting to smuggle a secret letter to Theodora, who was over in Iran, which gave Mehmet the Conqueror the needed excuse to kill David once and for all. He considered that this letter was a conspiracy to try and recapture Constantinople with the help of those Akkoyunlu rulers, and that's how David, his sons, his nephew, were all executed on the 1st of November 1463. Now, David was Theodora's uncle, but despite his death, she continued to try and influence her husband in foreign affairs. So, according to historians, she was the moving force behind diplomatic overtures to Venice in 1465 and to Stephen III of Moldavia in 1474. And then when the Venetian diplomat Caterino Zeno comes to the court of Uzun Hasan in 1473, one of the first people he meets is Theodora. He's not meeting the Muslim officials, he's meeting her. And then he tells the woman, well, what happens when two people get together? They're talking about, he must take they were related. And on the basis of this, they established he was a distant cousin or something. She gave him unparalleled access to Uzun Hasan. And apparently, Caterino Zeno of Venice and Despina Khatun or Theodora spoke to each other in Pontian dialect. And this has been recorded by the historians. So, at this period of time, mid-1400s, there is a tacit, not tacit, it's blatant recording of the fact that the Greek spoken in Pontus is different to that than other parts of Greece, okay, or the Greek world. So, Uzun Hasan dies in 1478, and then we don't really know what happens to her, but we do know that she's buried in the Church of St. George in Diyarbakir, and her tomb was shown to an Italian visitor in 1507, but the structure was damaged in 1883 and it no longer exists. So, that's Ipsikratia, going back to her. The stories of these, I think, and many other Pontian women are enthralling, at least I find them enthralling, but we need to be wary, yeah? Problem with all of these strong female characters is that they're portrayed as masculine characters. We consider them strong because they're doing things that we would ordinarily have been conditioned to expect that men do. And this character trope, I think, repeats the same mistake as its predecessor. It depicts women in a one-dimensional character trait. So, we need to consider this. Being feminine does not equal being weak, and being masculine does not equal being strong, yeah, I think. So you have your Amazons and your strong female rulers being prone to stereotypes. Being tough means hanging with being prone to violence, consorting with men, fighting in combat, showing little or no emotions, kicking ass. Yeah? These are traits that are typically credited to masculinity. There's a decided lack of sources, I think, about the everyday life of Pontian women. We really don't know that much. They were not considered important. The only ones that were written about were the ones that had money and power. So there is a class bias in what we're talking about that needs to be considered. Yeah, and they're only they're only being recorded because men found them interesting. That's the other thing we need to discuss. Apart from Anna Komnene of Byzantium, few women of the Byzantine world ever recorded their thoughts. At least none, not many survive. We don't know how they thought. We don't know how they felt. We don't know what motivated them. We don't know. And until these sources come to light, and if these sources come to light ever, As powerful as they are, these voices will never be heard. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dean. I've taken lots of notes. I'm going to go home and look
No, please don't.
much of it up. But I just want to refer to what you said right at the end, that these women were masculine in many ways, and that's why they captured historians' attention.
Portrayed as masculine.
Portrayed as masculine.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know.
Okay. Well, do you think there was a matriarchy anywhere in there over that period that you covered?
How would you define matriarchy?
Well, power structures that held for generations.
I think there would have to be, and I think it's implied by the fact that there's this tacit acceptance that rulers like Irene or like Anna Hutlu can actually rule in their own right. Yeah. But it's complicated. You have these women, but they're supported by families, and within those families there are patriarchal/matriarchal structures that are complex. You know, it reminds me of Bakoyani and the Mitsotakis family. No? Was Marika the matriarch, or was she just playing to the patriarchy by helping her family? And what the hell is daughter about anyway? But you take people like Dinamis and you take people like Ipsikratia, and there's just this acceptance that these women can rule and can do what they're doing. And that's not considered remarkable, per se, by these authors. It just is what it is. Whereas in the West, that would have been unheard of, and it was unheard of. That didn't happen. That was considered out of this world. And I think that's the point that you would make about that, that there may not have been in your face women rule, but when they did rule, that was okay.
Thank you. Here we are, the first question.
Old duck. I didn't mean to be entertaining, so I apologise. Thank you.
You mentioned both at the start of your presentation and at the end there about having historical records, like missing that vital viewpoint itself. Are we aware of any lost writings, any lost historical tracks or treatises that might give us a better look at what they really thought?
No, the answer's no.
Right.
So much was lost. There's not much there. It's only through the male historians that we hear these tales.
Right. So even the imperial figures never wrote a biography or never
Not
wrote anything?
not one that we know about or we've heard about.
Right. So you're as close as we're ever going to get.
At the moment.
Sure.
At the moment.
Okay.
Till I grow a few inches.
No worries.
Do you want the real story or the not real story?
One.
The non-real stories that I scrolled through weighty tomes and didn't copy and paste everything from Wikipedia. It's been a topic that I've been fascinated with my whole life. This idea of these hidden narratives behind histories, and especially the Greek history. And because I'm close to the Pontian community, and I really value the work they're doing here in Melbourne, and because the Pontian community, as you would have seen at the beginning of the lecture, is dominated by, I would have said, by very strong, very determined Pontian women. That just got me thinking, got me on that line of inquiry. Can we talk about a diachronicity? Is it something that is inherited? Is it part of the culture? Or is this purely a Melbourne phenomenon? So that was, if you like, why originally.
Another question, perhaps? No? Dean, would you like to say something else?
No, I'll quit while I'm ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Before you go, Penny would like to...
Hello. There you go. You're wearing my belt. As Heracles, I should be able to rip that belt off when he just wants to know.
Just a small token of our appreciation for Dean tonight.
It's a large token.
Just to say thank you. Just to say thank you for getting this presentation together for us tonight. Thank you very much for all your continued support over the years, and we look forward to next year's lecture. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Down the back. There's some light refreshments. Feel free to come and speak to Dean if you've got any
We're also selling
questions.
Genocide brand wines.
Thank you. I just want to refer to next week's lecture. It won't be here at the mezzanine. It's an online presentation from London. And our speaker, I'll just refer to my notes, our speaker will be Dr. Anna Papadiamantis, who is the lecturer in Sociology and Social Policy at University College in London. And her paper will be entitled The Economy in Crisis, Cartooning During the Greek Financial Crisis. So another art sort of orientated talk as well, Dean. Thank you. Thank you for coming, everyone. It's been lovely.